Within the last several weeks, several major events have taken place, from the release of the Epstein files to a war breaking out involving Iran to events surrounding ICE and immigration, and fraud being exposed on a massive level in certain parts of our government across multiple states. On top of that, we've seen a lot of political infighting, whether it's the left fighting with its own radicals or the right arguing with people like Nick Fuentes about anti-Semitism and other issues. There's a lot happening in our country right now, and much of it comes down to propaganda and why you as the viewer need to make sure that you can identify the information you're being fed on a daily basis. If you're new here, welcome. This is my first real video. First upload was more of an introduction, wasn't really much, but I wanted to make this video first because I thought it was a very interesting topic. I hope you enjoy the video, and if you can, please leave a like, and I would really appreciate it if you subscribe. For me, each subscription is one person holding me responsible to making good content, basically, and I'm going to do my best to hold myself to that standard. I also have a TikTok and a Twitch I plan to start using soon. Not long ago, I came across a video on YouTube titled "I Am Russian, Here's How Propaganda Works." It was named by a creator called Silent East. I'll leave a link of his video in the description because he makes several videos explaining how Russia politics works, especially under Putin, and why people can't simply rise up to him, basically. It's very interesting and I highly recommend watching it. I think a lot of people, especially when Russia invaded Ukraine several years ago, everyone's wondered the same thing. Why would the Russian people support a leader like Putin unless they're completely psyoped, genuinely believe he's a good leader? How could they support someone attacking another country, especially a man who seems to rig elections? I don't even know how many times he's been elected as Russia's leader. From the perspective of someone in the United States, that obviously looks strange. You genuinely might think this guy must be crazy. And I assure you, Russians think the same thing. There's even a trend not too long ago where Russian people who were either living in Russia or managed to leave Russia were saying that they couldn't return because the country had become a place they didn't recognize anymore, or just a place that they don't like anymore. So the question remains, how can people still support someone like that? Well, it all comes down to propaganda. When people think about propaganda, they usually imagine various examples, things like the famous Uncle Sam poster saying, "I want you to recruit soldiers." It might be a thing about advertisements, news broadcasts, or government messaging designed to recruit people or influence opinions.
Real propaganda is messier, more boring, more human. For a long time I thought propaganda was something that only worked on people who weren't very smart. I really believed that. I thought, I can tell when something is nonsense, I can recognize manipulation, I am not a child. And that belief itself is exactly what propaganda relies on. Because propaganda doesn't need to make you stupid, it just needs to make you tired. When you live inside it, propaganda doesn't arrive as an event. There is no moment where you say, ah yes, now the propaganda has begun. It's just the part of the environment, like humidity, like background noise you don't consciously listen to, but which still affects how you feel. It's the TV that's always on in someone else's apartment.
Propaganda, especially in Russia, works differently. As Silent East explains in his video, propaganda in Russia largely comes through the news. It's a constant feed of information, repeated over and over again. I'll let him explain the specifics, but the core idea is simple.
I remember mornings when I'd wake up, open my phone, see another heavy headline, and feel a physical resistance. Not fear, not denial, just resistance. Like my body saying, if you let this in right now, your whole day is gone. So I'd scroll past it. Not because I forgot, but because I wanted to be able to function. This is the part people often misunderstand. They think ignoring something means you don't care. In reality, ignoring is often what caring too much looks like when you have no power.
When people are constantly fed information, whether it's true or false, it becomes exhausting. Anyone who watches the news regularly understands the fatigue. I think we all can. Sometimes you have to step away from it. Even recently with the Epstein files, many people needed to take a break just to process everything they were hearing because it was overwhelming. Anyone can become fatigued by constant news cycles, and honestly, if you decide to ignore it for a while, I don't blame you, really, at all. If you get tired of nonstop news and step away to focus on your family, your friends, your people, the people you really care about, that is not weakness. Sometimes you have to step back and remind yourself what really matters. But here's the real question. What happens when the information you're being fed sometimes becomes unbelievable? What happens when news reports start making claims that people instinctively feel aren't true?
I remember sitting with my parents while the news was on in the background. It was always on, not because anyone cared deeply, but because silence felt strange. At some point the presenter said something so absurd that I laughed. I made a sarcastic comment. My father didn't react at all. He didn't defend it, he didn't argue, he just said, "Why are you paying attention to this?" That question hit me harder than any statement. Why was I paying attention? Propaganda teaches you that paying attention is pointless, that caring too much is childish, that trying to build a clear picture of reality is naive. You're subtly trained to believe that the smartest move is distance.
Before going further, I want to make an important distinction. News in the United States is very different from what appears to be happening in Russia. In the United States, there's a lot of political bias. That bias can absolutely lead to lying, exaggeration, or misinterpretation from both sides of the political spectrum. I think that's fair to say. Most of misinformation comes from competing parties attacking each other. In Russia, however, misinformation is largely pushed directly by the ruling government itself. While the systems are different and the end result can sometimes look similar, people eventually stop trusting what they hear. When a news outlet constantly pushes information at you and you begin hearing things that seem unbelievable, you start to tune out. Eventually you stop caring. When misinformation flows through countless channels nonstop, people disengage. They don't want to care about something that feels completely disconnected from reality. And that's why I'm talking about this, because propaganda isn't something that's existed in the past. It's happening right now. Right now, many people are exhausted about hearing about the Epstein files. There were obvious attempts at gaslighting before their release, and there are still attempts now as more information comes out. At the same time, the news cycle quickly shifts to something else, like events happening in Iran. The headlines never stop. There's always another story, another crisis, another major event taking place and dominating the internet or the news. Now, that's not to say what's happening in Iran isn't important. It obviously is. But this rapid shift from one major topic to the next is exactly how modern information cycles and sometimes propaganda work. Attention moves quickly and people move on just as fast. Another major factor is misinformation. One of the biggest platforms in misinformation right now is X, formerly Twitter. Ironically, one of the biggest spreaders of misinformation on that platform is Elon Musk, the owner himself, along with figures like Donald Trump, as well as many others, people who actively fight against misinformation. Whether the claims they spread are absurd or believable, the constant flood of information itself becomes a form of propaganda. Because when people are bombarded with nonstop claims, especially ones that sound outrageous, they eventually stop looking into them at all. So what happens when you have a big figure like Elon Musk constantly spreading information or misinformation to the point where it just sounds ridiculous that you just start to tune out? And this is just why it's important to do your own research. We've already seen examples of misinformation online, including videos claiming that Iran was bombing US ships when it was completely made by AI or made from the video game DCS, which is like a realistic fighter jet simulator. And the scary part is it works. There's a reason why people joke about older generations believing AI videos online. But honestly, it's not just like boomers. Even I've had to do double takes on videos to see if whether real or AI, because it's getting crazy out there. And to be honest, sometimes I've been fooled. So what does propaganda look like today and where does it come from? TikTok, Twitter, and it's just misinformation spreading faster than ever. And eventually people get tired of it and stop paying attention. But that's exactly when propaganda works. Now here's the big thing. Any kind of information meant to influence how we interpret the world, whether it's lies, half-truths, or even selective facts, can be propaganda when it's spread intentionally by a group, organization, or government. That is why it's important for you, the viewer, to recognize when propaganda is happening. If you start seeing a constant repetition of the same message, the same talking points, or the same symbolism coming from a particular group or side, take a moment to look at it, verify whether it's real, check multiple sources, and if the constant flood of information becomes overwhelming, it's okay to step away for a while. Just stay informed, but don't let it completely consume your life. Because if it does, eventually you'll stop listening altogether. And that's exactly when propaganda works best. The moment you stop caring is when propaganda works. Anyway, I hope you all have a good one. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. I'll see you all later.